Very good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located right now. And welcome to today's webinar entitled Chile and Peru's Education Sectors Today, International Education, Market Updates, Trends, and Developments. My name is Colin Dewar. I'm the Director of External Relations at the BC Council for International Education, BCCIE, and I will be today's moderator. BCCIE is a provincial government agency under the Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Training, advancing the interests of international education throughout the entire education sector, including K through 12, higher education, and the language sector. So thank you for joining us today in what promises to be an important presentation for two of our key international education partners, Chile and Peru. And of course, two of the four partners of the Pacific Alliance as well. Today's webinar is co-hosted by BCCIE and the Trade Commissioner Service Global Affairs Canada. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that BCCIE is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Before I introduce our panelists, just a couple housekeeping items to go through. Everybody has a control panel if you're on a laptop, and you can open and close that panel accordingly with the auto hide control or the view icon. Everybody today is muted. We have over 120 people registered for today's webinar. So everybody will be on mute, but we encourage you to use the question box to submit your questions, which we will get to nearing the end of the webinar. We should have about 45 minutes or so for Q&A with our trade commissioners and academic affairs advisor as well. So we encourage you to use that. You can submit the questions throughout the webinar and we will get to them, as I've said, in the end. If we don't have time to get to them all, we will still submit those questions, share them with the trade commissioners post-webinar for their response as well. If you have any technical problems or questions, please also submit them in the question box as well. And my team, EJ and Gabrielle at BCCIE, are behind the scenes here. Thank you to both of them, and they will be helping with any technical questions that you may have. So I would like to just introduce today's panelists. We have with Diego Urbina Fletcher, Trade Commissioner, Embassy of Canada in Peru, but also represents Bolivia as well. We have Priscilla Lopez, Academic Affairs Officer, Embassy of Canada in Chile. Thank you for joining us, Priscilla. And Margot Edwards, Trade Commissioner, Embassy of Canada, also in Chile. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us for our series of Trade Commissioner briefings. So we appreciate it, and I know our sector does very much. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over the mic to Diego, who will go through the Peru portion of our presentation. So Diego.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. Good morning, everyone. And thank you also to BCCIE for organizing this presentation. I think it's a very important partner for us and for engaging with all the BC education institutions. So if we go to the first slide, I'd like to the next one, please. I'd like just to start by saying that Peru is a fast-growing market. In economic terms, we've been for several years one of the rising stars in the region. But of course, we are now heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will be facing our first economic recession in more than 20 years, and it's going to be a hard one. We just got numbers yesterday that the GDP dropped by 40% in April, and we expect that this will happen also for the one in May. So it's going to be hard, but on the positive side, most economic analysts say that Peru is one of the best prepared countries in Latin America to face this economic downturn. So we would expect a faster recovery. Nonetheless, this is definitely affecting the education market. Just this morning, we received a report that was prepared by FPP. Those are the organizers of our education fairs that we do globally, where they surveyed different students from the region. And one of the questions was if the economic downturn had affected their plans for studying abroad. It's not as negative as one would have expected. In the case of Peru, there's a big percentage, 38% actually says that they are still keeping their original plans to study abroad, and the remaining 42% say that they keep their plans, but they might have to postpone it. So just 10% out of the 2,000 students surveyed in Peru said that they would no longer study abroad. So this is, I think, among all the negative, a positive thing, because we still believe that this will be an interesting and growing market for education institutions. Now, whether while the economic hub in Peru is still the capital, is Lima, that's where most of the money is, there's increasing potential in some of the other big cities and provinces like Arequipa, Piura, Trujillo. So we do suggest that when education institutions visit the market, they save the time to reach out to one or two of these cities. There's still some interesting potential out of Lima as well. The main potential is at post-secondary level and for language training. However, what we've seen in the past few years since we've been promoting actively education in Canada is that all different levels of education are growing, whether it is undergrad, college degrees, even K-12, which was something that there wasn't that much potential at the beginning. We've seen some growing. The drivers would be the first one would be the quality of education in Canada, so the high standards, followed by the cost, the proximity, and the personal security, in that order. In terms of influencers in the market, I would say that for undergrad studies, parents and agents are very important. Being a Latin American country, parents tend to have a strong voice in their children's future. So we do invite a lot of parents for undergrad study opportunities presentations, and agents are, of course, also very important, being an agent-driven market. For postgrad studies, it's mostly peers and industry that are the promoters and the ambassadors of postgraduate studies in Canada. And direct recruitment efforts are very, very important. Next one, please. The Peruvian universities and colleges now, I would say also colleges, are very open to signing student and teacher mobility agreements and for research collaboration. Just to give you a few numbers, when we started doing strong promotion of education in 2012, we had, in 2012, we had 15 agreements between Canadian and Peruvian institutions. Now, by the end of 2019, we have over 70. So there's been an exponential growth and an exponential interest in engaging with Canadian counterparts. Also, we've had an increase in the number of students applying to the ELAP scholarship. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a GAC scholarship for doing a semester in Canada as an exchange student. So over 300 Peruvian students have benefited from this scholarship since 2009. There's in Peru an ongoing reform in education promoted by the Ministry of Education. We've had new universities and technical education laws in the past few years to raise the quality of both private and public education institutions. And we've seen now also a strong interest in online learning, which has been much promoted during this lockdown these past 3 months. There is also opportunities for capacity building programs and language training with the public and private sectors. And maybe one of the big challenges here in the market is that not all the programs, especially at technical level, are necessarily aligned with the labor market needs. So there's been some interest in working with Canadian institutions that have a better understanding on how to engage the academia with the industry and try to bring that model to Peru to improve the quality, especially of technical education. Strong competition here is especially from the US, UK, and Australia, if we talk about English speaking destinations. But what we've seen is that Canada, while still not having the numbers of the US or even much in Australia, is growing much faster than these other destinations. So I would say that we are now one of the fastest growing markets. In terms of student mobility indicators, we've seen, as I said, an increase of the number of partnerships, also an increase in the number of Peruvians studying in Canada. It has more than doubled in the last 4 years. We closed 2019 with over 1,000 students with study permits, plus around 500 students doing language training. Those are a little harder to track because they can go with tourist visas, so we don't necessarily know if they are studying or not, but this is an estimate. But as I said, we've doubled the number of Peruvian students in the last 4 years, and this makes Peru, along with Colombia, the 2 fastest growing countries in Latin America in sending students to Canada. There are some opportunities for scholarships to study abroad. I would say they are kind of limited because they focus especially on postgraduate degrees and only for universities that are among the top 400 in the QS rankings. So this qualifies around 20, 21, depending on the year, Canadian universities. The only Canadian province that has a specific scholarship agreement with Peru is Quebec, that offers masters and PhDs at domestic rates. Next, please. Now going to the different education levels, starting by K to 12. As I said at the beginning, this was not a sector that we promoted that much because there wasn't that much potential. Peruvians don't tend to sell their children to study abroad for high school, but this is starting to change. What we've seen is that there's strong interest, especially in summer or winter camps during our high school holidays, which of course are the opposite as the ones in the Northern Hemisphere. Especially for kids between 15 and 17 years old. And we've gotten in the past few months or weeks requests for online homeschooling programs because this year Peru will not be having presential classes until December. So there's interest in having online homeschooling experiences that might be provided to especially private schools here. So if there's any capabilities that you might share in this, there's the possibility of doing it. In terms of technical studies, around 10% of the students aged between 19 and 25 opt for a technical degree. What we've seen is that there's still a very big gap in the quality of university degrees and technical degrees. And this tends that technical degrees are mostly targeting the lower income segment of the population, unless it's programs that are not taught at universities. Let's say digital art, interior design, graphic design, video game production, things like that. Those might be targeted to higher income segments of the population. But if you go to the welding, heavy machinery equipment, things like that, it's usually people that don't necessarily will have the means, the economic means to study abroad. What we've identified in different fairs and activities that we've done for technical degrees is that there are 3 specific targets that Canadian colleges might address. One is professionals that already have some years of experience and would like to do short courses in Canada to advance their academic or their professional capabilities and then return to Peru. Usually this is for certificates of around 6 months or so because they cannot go abroad for a long period. Then you would have another group that's interested in immigrating to Canada and see colleges as the easiest and best suited stepping stone for them, so that this is so they see education as a door for immigration with their families. These people see it as a life project, so they tend to make the economic efforts to pay for it. They don't necessarily seek for scholarships in this case. And then there's a younger segment that see colleges as a pathway to universities because it's sometimes easier or cheaper to start at a college and then go to a university. This is something that we've been actively promoting and explaining to Peruvian students because this is not the model that we have in Peru. Here, it's not that easy to go from one system to the other like it might be in Canada. So now that students are learning that this is a possibility, I think that there's much more interest in these pathway opportunities. Next, please. In terms of undergraduate studies, this is something that has grown very fast in the past few years. We used to have the biggest segment of Peruvian students in Canada doing postgrad studies. Now it has shifted to undergrad studies. Here, direct recruitment is very important. Our EduCanada fairs are very popular for high school students looking for undergrad opportunities once they graduate. Third-party fairs also are very popular here. Education agents, which are always looking after partnering with Canadian universities. Just to mention an example, the biggest education agent here in Peru is called LAE, which stood for Latin Australia Education. They were mostly focused in Australia and had a few Canadian institutions represented, but they've changed their name. Now they are just LAE, which doesn't stand for anything, because they do see that Canada will be their primary market in the next 1 or 2 years. And that's happening with many of the agents. They are actively working with Canadian institutions. Actually, we have our annual education agent training with the embassy tomorrow. And this is also a way on promoting different Canadian programs. And there's many IB schools in Peru, which are private schools, very expensive schools. Some of them can be even more expensive than studies in Canada. And this is definitely a target audience for you. But the tricky part is that these schools the students from these schools don't tend to go to education fairs. They expect that schools or that universities visit their high schools and do presentations specifically for them. Next, please. For graduate studies, as I said, there's really high market potential here. There are government agencies that fund international degrees, but this is, as I explained before, limited to some universities that qualify under the QS rankings. There's the chance to work with the public sector in capacity building programs. There are some already agreements in place that I will explain in the next slide. In terms of which programs are the most popular, MBA would be the first, followed by engineering masters. And now we've seen a growth in interest for health programs, environment, design. I would say that across the board, we're seeing a lot of interest, hospitality, etc. What the recommendations would be here is also to attend the fairs, to work on direct recruitment, work with the agents and with the Chamber of Commerce here. Next, please. Finally, language programs, especially for ESL, there's a strong interest, but there's also strong competition. There are multiple local English schools in the country which are very, very cheap. So their cost is definitely a factor to take into consideration here. What might be the benefit, the comparative advantage on doing it in Canada is that you get the chance to live with a Canadian family or to engage on a summer or winter camp where you will be speaking English the whole time. So this is something that they appreciate. In terms of French, the Alliance Française is also very big in Peru. It actually Peru has the largest network of Alliance Française schools in the world. Our recommendation here, the same, direct recruitment, working with agents, try to identify the target audience, and that's it. Yeah. Next, please. Just briefly, there's a shortage of private bilingual schools in Peru, so that might be an opportunity if someone's interested in opening a Canadian school here. There's non-Canadian schools in Peru, and there's, I think, that could be an interesting opportunity, a business opportunity. Next, please. Just 3 examples of institutional partnerships very briefly. Financial College signed a dual credential agreement with Peru's Technical Institute for the Armed Forces. Caldo Consortium of Universities is working with the Ministry of Energy and Mines for capacity building programs for their officials. The University of Alberta has an agreement with the Ministry of Energy and Mines for also capacity building programs. And these are the type of partnerships that you could look for in the market. You could work with us at the embassy and trying to identify these potential opportunities. Next, please. Just to finish, some market entry considerations. The cost is a decisive factor, as I said. There are some scholarships that are very limited. Direct recruitment is very, very important. Working with agents as well. And please consider working with us at the embassy if you're interested in visiting the market, in engaging with different contacts or doing a mission here. We will be happy to help. In the next one, you have my contact details that also Colin would be happy to share with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Diego, for that portion of the presentation for Peru. I would now like to invite Priscilla Lopez to continue with the Chile portion of our presentation today. So I'll hand it over to you, Priscilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you everyone for being here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening also. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Chilean education sector looks today due to all the contingencies. So if you can go to the first slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little overview of the education sector. We are a very stable market in Latin America. However, just like Diego said, we have also been severely impacted by the COVID-19 situation. Actually, Chile's GDP is expected to shrink by 7.2% in the second quarter. So it's a very big impact, which has affected most economy in the entire country. Most of the businesses, I'm going to go for explain a little bit more going further in the presentation, but there's been a very severe impact. We are usually a very stable country in the region. However, we have suffered not only by the COVID-19 situation, but also by some social unrest that took place in 2019 due to some inequalities of the economic policies of the government. So there was also a severe impact about that. We have been growing modestly in study permits in the past 5 years. We've had an increase of 25% in the past 5 years. We have 550 study permits in 2019. We have a young population between 15 and 24 years of age of 14.63%, and between 25 and 54 years of age of 42.94%. Regarding the education itself in Chile, we can say that regarding pricing, for example, we have some public institutions and some private institutions. However, some private institutions in pricing are very similar to some higher educations in Canada. So there's a potential there to be competitive, and students here in Chile are seeing more and more the possibility to go to Canada and pursue studies. So regarding the market, also half of the households are characterized as middle class. However, we have to identify that we have a very broad middle class, and some of these households are characterized as low middle class and some high middle class. So the term middle class in Chile is very, very broad. Regarding visa requirements, Chileans do not need a visa to go to Canada for up to 6 months, and they take this opportunity, for example, to go and pursue language studies, because for courses for up to 6 months, they don't require a visa at all. And also the system for applying for a study permit is online. And we have had direct flights from Toronto through to Santiago for some time now. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have some funding opportunities for Chilean students. We of course have also the Emerging Leaders in the Americas program that funds a semester abroad for up to for 4 months in the undergraduate sector, and for up to 6 months for research, for example. We have also some spots from that program that is now called Canada-Chile Leadership program. So we had around 60 to 70 spots every year for Chilean students, and it's becoming very popular. But also we have a national scholarship program that it's from ANID, and it stands for National Association for Research and Development. This program is very, very popular and provides full funding for undertaking international studies at a master's and PhD, for master's PhD programs. However, most of these programs have been suspended through because of the COVID-19 situation. Actually, the only program that remains active at this point is the PhD scholarship program, but all the masters for priority areas, for students with disabilities, for teachers, for postdoctoral studies, and subespecialidades médicas, those have been suspended. And also we had another program that is called Técnicos para Chile. This program also provides full funding for a complete program abroad. Canada is one of the countries eligible for undertaking this Técnicos para Chile program for a full Tibet program, and it provides also tuition and living costs, not only for the student, but also for the accompanying family members. However, the program has been suspended because of the COVID-19 situation, but this program is very interesting because currently technical education is a priority for the government. So this program was suspended for a while, but now has been reactivated and now suspended again because of the situation. But it's a program that provides a very high funding for undertaking technical studies abroad. And we also have active, this is not a scholarship, but this is a program from the government of Canada, the International Experience Canada program, that provides a work permit for young people between the ages of 18 and 35 to go to Canada and work. They can work for up to a year, but they can also study for up to 6 months. So it's very attractive for those who want to go and experience Canada as an international destination to work, but also to study and improve the language. Next slide, please. So we have some trends going on in the market and some opportunities. As I said before, we are very stable and open business environment. So institutions are very eager to establish agreements with Canadian institutions. The Embassy of Canada, we are the main actor here in Chile for the promotion and support of Canadian institutions. So if you have a question or if you need us to provide you with our market report, please do not hesitate to contact us, and we'll provide you all the information you need. We have the most effective types of promotion, just like Diego said. For us, it's the education fairs, the third-party fairs happening in Chile are the FPP Edu-Canada Fair that takes place usually in September each year, but also we have other main events like the BMI Fair and other fair hosted also by FPP in the spring. And also social media here and mostly agents play a key role in the decision-making process for students and parents. So just like Diego also said, on-site recruitment is highly, highly recommended. Please visit the market, please engage with institutions. For example, we've had a couple of missions in the past years for example, for Languages Canada, for CEGEP, and also we had expected to have a CAPSI mission, but I'm guessing this we'll have to discuss whether it's going on or not. But they have all shown a very great success in the past, so it's a very, very good way to engage with the market. Of course, the language of promotion is mostly in Spanish. We don't have English as part of the curricula here in Chile, so that's a room to improve there. So as I said before, education is also a top priority for the Chilean government. We also had a education reform that provided free university education for lower income families. So that's pretty good because it allows the entrance to higher education for the poorest or lower income families. So, and that's been going on for the past 2 to 3 years and has shown a great rate of success. And it also that allows for those students to access those universities with agreements with Canadian universities and access, for example, opportunities like the Emerging Leaders in the Americas program. So universities are very keen to explore and establish partnership with Canadian associations and institutions like CALDO Consortium, who has a very big presence here in Chile. And for example, I'm here putting as an example the CALDO and ANID agreement that they have for adding the local tuitions to those who applied for the CALDO Consortium universities. But for the student, mostly also besides exploring scholarship opportunities, they consider many factors. For example, the language, the cost, and that's why Canada is becoming very competitive because of the prices that are more convenient, the high quality of the programs, and the immigration opportunities. Next slide, please. But we also have many challenges. For example, nowadays, because of the contingency, the shift in the priorities, all the ANID scholarship have been suspended except for the PhD program. And we have a lot of competition by our main competitors that just as Diego are the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. They do a lot of on the ground promotion. So those are the ones that provide that have also many fairs and many programs available. And Canada still have some weaknesses on our market. And for example, students consider that Canada has very few scholarships by universities or provincial and federal governments, and the lack of reciprocity also, because I don't know if you know, but the International Experience Canada program, for example, is reciprocal. So we have 750 spots available for Chileans to go to Canada, and they all get filled up every year. But also this program allows Canadians to come to Chile, and unfortunately not many spots are filled with that program. So that's a problem. And also the increasing interest for English language, there's a lot of interest, but there's low interest for French programs. So there's also a challenge there. And the market is also price sensitive. As I was mentioning before, we have a very broad middle class that sometimes do have the means to have their children pursuing language studies abroad, but the purchasing power is limited. So there's a challenge also in that sense. Also, very important, as I said before, coming to the market and promote to have the face-to-face contact, because here in Chile this is very important. Chileans value this handholding because the Chilean youth tends to get independent at a later age than other countries, and so that's why still parents and counselors and education agents play a very, very important role in this decision making. So it's important for you to come and participate at our education fairs. And finally, the perception of Canada, then they still perceive it as a great country, but sometimes a little bit cold. And there's still little knowledge about the advantages of Canada as an education destination, about the opportunities for immigrating, for working while studying, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, so regarding, for example, each sector, in the case of language programs, as I was saying, the promotion from other competitors is very high. The US and UK and France have their own institutes. There are also a lot of offer from local institutes. Here in Chile, we have more than 46 located in the capital, Santiago, but the quality is not sometimes the best, it's medium standard, so there's a chance there, an opportunity to go and promote the high quality of the education programs in Canada. There's also a lot of offer for mix on online class courses, and the demand for tailor-made programs is growing very fast. So there's active recruitment from competitors such as Australia, the US, and the UK. Sometimes they have their own fairs only dedicated to language programs, but the opportunities that are there are for offering online training to higher education institutions. As I was saying before, language is not part of the curriculum, but higher education institutions understand the importance of having their students understanding the English language. So they are more and more trying to seek opportunities to provide this training online for them. So there's a possibility there. Next slide, please. For the K-12 sector, this is a little bit different than Peru. Here in Chile, it's growing in popularity, and there are many parents trying to send their children abroad for a semester, for a year abroad. Also, the agents play a key role. Just like in the case of Peru, we also have schools that are top ranked here, and that they have the international baccalaureate, and they even can be even more expensive than Chilean university. So there's also the challenge there that they like on-site recruitment for recruitment. They don't usually go to education fairs. So there's an opportunity to go and recruit in these high schools. There are many of them located in Santiago, but many of them also located in the regions. We have the most important regions here to recruit on this sector would be Santiago, but also Viña del Mar, and in cities, for example, in Valdivia, there are and Concepción, where we have these big high schools. There we have seen that there's been an interest from institutions to provide the online training from the local curricula through online training. So we've received interest from Canadian companies to provide the training to local schools. So that's another perhaps niche there to explore. Next slide, please. Regarding the college and technical institutes, also the enrollment is it's high, but also like Diego said, the interest goes to undertake this technical study for specific programs. For example, for film and for video game design, for design itself. But the interest to undertake other types of program is not very high in Chile. We have a 44% of total enrollment in higher education corresponding only to technical studies in Chile, and usually technical studies are undertaken by more lower income population. However, there's this possibility of undertaking studies abroad under the Técnicos para Chile program, because as I said before, technical education is a priority for the current government, and there are possibilities of establishing agreements with the biggest and most prestigious institutes here in Chile. These are DUOC, INACAP, IEP, and IP from Santo Tomás University that has a professional institute as well. However, we've seen a lot of interest also in students to see technical education and college education as a pathway for immigrating to Canada. They understand that undertaking studies at a college can be shorter than undertaking studies at a university, for example, and this way they can access the postgraduate work permit, and this way eventually they can immigrate to Canada. So we've seen a lot of interest in undertaking college education for that purpose, and also because of the high employability of the technical programs in Canada. So there's a lot of room there to explore, and there are also a lot of opportunities for on-site recruitment promoting this niche. Next slide, please. For university studies, this is our biggest and the highest potential sector. We have a growing potential on the undergraduate sector. However, as I said before, since English is not part of the curriculum, it's a challenge because the proficiency here in Chile is very low, is low. So in this scenario, universities are stepping in, are trying to provide training for their students, but it's an ongoing process. But the highest potential is on the graduate level still. Students are actively seeking to pursue studies at the master's and PhD level, because also they have the possibility of getting scholarships through a need, and also because there's been a lot of interest in for signing agreements between Canadian and Chilean universities. And also, for example, there have been actors like MyTax who are looking into seeking agreements with CRUSH, which is the Council of Chilean Universities, and Corfo, to encourage bilateral student mobility and research under their programs. So there's another possibility there to continue exploring possibilities for Chilean students. Actually, the biggest potential still are on the MBA. To pursue an international MBA is very popular here in Chile. We have at least 5 MBA fairs happening yearly here in Chile, and we can always see that there's a lot of demand for them. And regarding universities, the programs that are of more interest of Chileans to pursue in Canada are on those industries where Canada and Chile share similarities. For example, in the forestry, environment, agriculture, and the TICS areas. Next slide, please. Well, so what's going on in Chile during the COVID situation? Well, the commercial flights have been canceled. The international borders still closed. The Chilean economy, as I said, was greatly impacted. The first quarter provided very, very negative results. And there's a quarantine happening currently here in Santiago and in other cities of Chile. For example, in Valparaíso, Viña del Mar, currently they're under quarantine. They're currently planned until June 19, but it's very expected that this will be extended because the peak of the disease here in Chile is happening right now. There's actually the system it's working under selective quarantines, where some cities with more positive COVID-19 cases are under quarantine and others are not. This is all being monitored by the Ministry of Health. They provide daily reports to inform how the COVID-19 situation has been evolving here in Chile. So, but we don't see currently the situation improving for the next few weeks. So we have this quarantine in place. So in the case of higher education institutions, most of these institutions have repatriated the students, but some of them remain in Canada conducting programs or research but online, of course. Here in Chile, all institutions have transitioned to online learning. This is not a set decision. There's not a full decision whether the school year is going to be ending online, but it's completely expected. The semester still is going to be finished online, and there's uncertainty towards the feasibility to complete the school year at the secondary and higher education level. Next slide, please. Well, in that same regard, all international mobility has been canceled. The VAC in Santiago is currently closed, but applications can be submitted online, and the biometric process is on hold until the VAC reopens, but we are still encouraging students who have their acceptance letters to continue applying online. Of course, due to the important impact on the family income, the funding for international mobility could be jeopardized. As Diego said, we also received this report from FPB, so are gladly surprised that students have said that this had not completely impacted their plans for undertaking studies abroad, but of course there's an impact there. The scholarship program for the National Agency for Research and Development has been suffered budget cuts. All these funds are going to the mitigate the COVID-19 situation in Chile. And in the case of education agents, they are all teleworking. There's been a hard impact on these sectors, and they are very grateful about the Canada's flexibility because they all say that Canada offers them the flexibility to postpone the programs and not to cancel. And they are very active on online promotion of international online programs. So they have been very active also promoting programs for Canada. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of trends and opportunities after the COVID situation. There are many digital promotion and creative innovative models for digital recruitment. There have been webinars. We are planning an online fair for the EduCanada version of the 2020 fair. This will be held online. We also are trying to organize sessions for B2B matchmaking for this year. But the trend is that funding options have to be available from Canada, scholarships, student loans. The market itself is going to be more price sensitive, and the priorities, of course, have changed. However, students still see Canada as a very safe and a potential country to improve their quality of life. So there's a lot of opportunities there to continue engaging and seeking agreements with Canadian institutions and also with education agents, because they, as I said before, they play a very important role. There's a lot of programs that can be implemented here in Chile. There's a lot of interest for hybrid or blended models of program to be delivered from Canadian institutions. And of course, there are a lot of interest in this opportunity to have to do the program 50% online and 50% presential in presence in Canada. Of course, there's always the opportunity to strengthen the ongoing collaboration that you have with your current partners as well. Next slide, just to almost finish. To collaborate online will be very important for international collaboration, since online language training, as I was saying before, is increasing in popularity here in Chile, and there are many students that see that Canadian institutions have been offering online programs with the highest quality that Canada can provide and at better prices. So we're promoting a lot of that. Virtual international mobility programs are also very attractive for international institutions and for students. Canadian online course proposal to Chilean students will also have to be adjusted to the new economic reality. We understand that there will be budget cuts of Chilean higher education institutions. So if they are going to be acquiring software or programs online to be implemented for their students, the offer and the proposal will have to be adjusted to the new reality of Chile. And always also use the current partnerships and extend your virtual collaboration and engagement with the local market. Here in Chile, we are very keen to explore, and the higher education institutions are very keen to explore new partnerships, so please keep engaging. Finally, please, the next slide. These are our contact details of Margot Edwards, the Education Trade Commissioner, and myself, Priscilla Lopez. These are our email, and please contact us if you have any questions, if you have any request of information. We're here for you, and we're always willing to assist. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Priscilla, for your presentation. I would now like to invite our two trade commissioners back, Diego and Margot, to the screen, and we will move into the Q&A portion. We have about 10 minutes or so for Q&A. I do have a few questions that have been submitted already. I'm going to start with Diego. We had a question around the social media platforms in Peru. Which ones are most pertinent and popular in Peru in terms of communication with students, or perhaps for recruitment purposes?
For education, Facebook would be the strongest one. And if it's short courses for professionals that are not that young, I would say LinkedIn.
Okay,
I wouldn't use Twitter for promoting education opportunities that much. It's still, Facebook's still stronger.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good, thank you. We have a question here concerning visa application and biometrics, which I think have been largely answered in the presentation, but if there's anything to add, the question is Chile and Peru processing visas and biometrics for students that are coming to Canada or planning to come to Canada? I can start with Priscilla, and then I'll ask Diego about that as well.
No. Okay. So as I said in the presentation, the back here we have only one back in Chile. It's located in Santiago. Currently, this office is closed, of course, because of the quarantine measures implemented. However, the advice from IRCC is for students to continue applying. The applications can be submitted completely online, and the biometrics can remain on hold until the back reopens, and this won't jeopardize their application at all.
Thank you. Diego, same question for you.
Yeah, in our case, it's also closed. What we've heard from our immigration colleagues is that it should open 2 weeks after it's supposed to be by the end of this month that the quarantine is lifted, so VAC should start operating mid-July.
Thank you. Next question I have is for Priscilla. Can you tell us about the programs, themes, topics, specializations that are most in demand and gaining in popularity, such as tailor-made programs, for example?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's going to depend on the education level we're talking about. If we're talking about language program, of course, there's a lot of interest in online programs nowadays. There's a lot of offer here in Chile, but unfortunately, the quality is not the best. So there's a lot of opportunities to explore there. If we're talking about university programs, those who are more and more popular are those in the areas that are where Chile and Canada share similarities. For example, in the forestry, agro-industry, but also in the engineering. Those are also always very important. For also another program that is also very huge in popularity here in Chile are MBAs. So I don't know if Margot can build a little bit more on this.
Not particularly with MBAs, but I think one of the strategy that the department has had in the last year was to try to match up trade training or align our course offer to the necessities, the demand from the industry here in Chile. It hasn't been easy because there's not that much collaboration between educational institutions and the private sector here. So we have been trying to develop course offerings in line with the demand of the industry here. And what we have seen is what Priscilla mentioned, basically those areas where the Chilean economy is active. One area that wasn't mentioned directly is mining. This is the area where Canada has most of its investment in the country, over $22 billion worth of investment. So therefore, the courses in engineering and mining engineering in Chile are good, but I have seen a lot of students interested in master degrees in that field. So basically, that's what we're trying to do here. Our goal is to align a Canadian offer with Chilean demand.
Good. Thank you. A question, I'll start with Diego on this, but it's also pitched to Priscilla and Margot. Yeah, for Diego, would grades 10 through 12 students from Chile and Peru be interested in short-term programs during the school year, the K through 12 sector in grade 10 through 12 during September or October? Maybe we could start with Diego.
Not that much. What we've seen is that if they do it, they would do it during our summer holidays, which would be between January, February, early March, or a short one during our winter holidays, which would be by the end of July, beginning of August.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Priscilla or Margot?
Exact same answer.
Okay. Okay. Very good. I have one question here. Probably our last question, just in terms of encouraging more students from British Columbia to study in Chile and Peru. What are the opportunities or challenges or barriers and opportunities to encourage more students to travel and study in your respective jurisdictions and countries, especially after travel restrictions would be lifted? I can start with maybe we can start with Margot.
Okay, well, in Chile's context right now, we're dealing with two challenges. One is the social unrest situation, which is pretty quiet right now, but started in October of last year. There's quite a lot of uncertainty on whether or not the protests will start again once COVID is behind us. So that's one challenge that we have to take into consideration. And the other one, of course, is travel restrictions during COVID times. Mm-hmm. The other thing is we have very little Canadian students that are interested in coming to Latin American countries. We see much more outbound students than inbound. And I think this is due basically to the fact that very little Canadians speak Spanish. So there is a challenge there with the language. This being said, we have had several indications from some of the major universities here in Chile that are starting to basically give their curricula in English, and precisely because they want to attract more foreign students. So I think there might be some changes coming up in that field. And if some courses, mainly in the engineering field, are offered in English, then it might be easier to promote Chile to Canadian students.
Okay, very good. I think I will have to end our webinar there. We're just coming up to the end of our time allotments. A couple things before we sign off. In the question panel, there is a link. If you could please click on that and give us a little bit of feedback on today's webinar. This really helps us improve and continue to make these more relevant over time. So we really appreciate your feedback to do that. I would like to formally thank our panelists for joining us today from Chile and Peru. It has been really informative and again, very helpful for our international education sector here in BC and really across Canada. So thank you again. I'll leave any parting remarks to our panelists, and that will be it. Priscilla, thank you.
Thank you again for organizing this session, and please, for all the viewers, do not hesitate in case you need any information from the Chilean market. We're here for you, and we can also assist in any mission or any collaboration that you want to explore here in Chile.
Excellent. Thank you. Margot, anything to add?
No, absolutely that. We're working from home at a distance, but we're close to you. So don't forget to call on us if you need information or you would like us to promote your institution.
Great. Thank you. And Diego.
Thank you, Colin. No, just that, echo what Margot and Priscilla said. The trade commissioners at the different missions are always willing to help you with any missions or initiatives that you have in our country. So please always engage with us when you're planning to visit.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. And please, everyone, enjoy your day. Take care of each other, and all our best here from BCCIE. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.